Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. With TBC confirmed, it's about time we did a little bit of a class update. Let's take a look back at each class in the Burning Crusade, their performance overall, and hopefully help you make your choice moving forwards. We will be looking at what's new in terms of talents and abilities, leveling, PvE, who's the new king of the meta, PvP has much changed, and tier sets which actually exist for every specialization now. And through this I hope to answer, is your class any better now?
Outland, huh? No doubt this'll be just as much of a joke as Classic was for me. Full Phase 6 Bis Fury Warrior, looking the guild.
Warlock LFG, I haven't played since Phase 2, but I've shadowbowed on 3 separate keybinds.
Yep, over here, welcome. Come this way, right this way. I, must have posted in the wrong channel. Let me try that again. Full Phase 6 Bis Fury Warrior, looking for guild. Hunter need guild. I just boosted to 58 and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I've got that macro that make Mr. Kitty go brrrr. Oh, right over here, right this way, over here, sir.
What the?
Hey, I see you're recruiting there. Do you need a Fury Warrior? I was the top passer on the server in Phase 6, and I'd love to, but we're full on melee. Sorry about that. Good luck on the search, though. But you only have 3 non-tank melee in the entire raid.
Yep, sorry, hands are tied here. You know, we're full, it is how it is.
Oh my god. Let me in. Let me in!
Today, through the Dark Portal is the most popular class in Classic by far, and I mean by far. When it comes to all-around performance in PvP, and especially PvE, there is quite literally no better choice than the warrior?
The warrior class.
Yes, that. Out of a possible 8 classes to pick for each faction at the moment, the raiding population on nearly every single server is 20% warrior. Ults included, of course, but yeah, the class is pretty good. Best tank, best DPS, scales exceptionally well, really fun to play with a constant flow of rage and ability spam. Who doesn't like seeing themselves at the top of the meters after all? So does this trend carry over to TBC? Well, not exactly, no. Warrior was really brought much more in line. That doesn't, however, mean they go from being literally the best at everything they can do to the worst. Far from it. It's just their legacy of dominance was taken back quite a few steps, and deservedly so I would say, since when does one class get to be the best for an entire duration of a game in an MMO? Well, normal MMOs anyway. Classic is a bit of a special case. And just a side note for the class, you really can make of it what you want. Back when I was doing the Was It Any Good Though videos, I'd say some classes were not so good on performance, and I would have people in the comments saying, but wait, back in my day I was always top DPS on my Boomkin doing my ZG pugs. I mean, that says a lot about the pugs, but yeah, if that's good enough for you then fine. I'm just trying to give a good impression of what you can expect from the class. After all, people like to perform well. That's why the top 2 played classes on almost every server are Warrior Mage at the moment. With that said, let's get into this. What's new for the Warrior then? Lots of new additions to utility, that's what. Rage generation was changed a bit. As far as I know, this should be correct for 2.43. I couldn't really find any more information on the subject. Actual normalization of rage gain wasn't a thing till Kata, by the way. I've seen that commented quite a few times. Also, the heroic strike queuing should still be working too, also not removed till Cataclysm, as heroic strike was made an instant attack then, not a next melee attack. A new shout was added. Commanding shout gives your party a bunch of extra health. It's either this or battle shout, by the way, so make sure you keep the right one up. Victory rush was also a thing in TBC. It doesn't heal like it does in later expansions though, but it doesn't have any rage cost, so a free bit of extra damage whilst leveling, or to get resets in PvE. It's something, I guess. Intervene was another addition. You may be noticing a trend here. Not much new on the damage front, is there? It's like charge or intercept, but for an ally, redirecting the next melee or ranged attack. Only usable in defensive stance. Pretty solid, can be good in PvE to get back in range of an enemy when someone decides they want to run away from the tank, instead of towards them when they get aggro, you know who you are. And is a very high skill cap ability in PvP, which can hard counter some CC setups. Speaking about PvP, Spell Reflection, something to keep you alive against those pesky mages. Well, perhaps for one additional global. It's a good ability, kind of easily telegraphed though, as the warrior has to put on the sword and board to use it. In PvE, it gives you a button to press against casters, though some harder hitting effects from bosses will just prevent the damage but not actually reflect the spell, unfortunately. Finally, whilst not a new active ability, it's pretty good, so I'll give it a mention. That is Stance Mastery. So you know how without Tactical Mastery, changing stances feels completely terrible as your rage is reset to 0? The Prot Fury players at the moment will know. Either way, with this new passive, you get to keep 10 rage when you change stance. Pretty good. Tactical Mastery still exists too, and stacks with this, though it's been downgraded from 25 rage kept to 15. Leveling then. I'll tell you what, I thought leveling as a warrior was going to be terrible in Classic. And to be honest, the early levels kind of felt like you're role-playing a level 15 NPC that has about one meaningful ability, but once you get through some levels, you pick up Sweeping Strikes, Whirlwind, Mortal Strike. The class really comes alive, and it's a lot of fun. Admittedly, I did level as much as I could with world buffs, and even in TBC, they will still work up to level 63, though I wouldn't really expect Oni to be getting reset or dropped multiple times a day anymore as people move onto the new content, or, you know, just boost past the whole thing. But with Victory Rush, more readily available gear through early quests, especially weapons, I reckon it won't be quite as painful as it's been made out to be. Oh, also stock up on bandages and potions, the usual for warriors really. Also, whatever you hear about warriors, their AoE is very good, for a melee class at least. They will be strong in dungeon content or where their ability to cleave will come in, such as Kara or ZA. Right then, on to PvE. This is where things get interesting for the warrior. So in Classic, they are number 1, and they have been from the moment the servers launch till whenever we go through the Dark Portal, and there are a number of reasons for that, some of which go away with TBC. Out of every class, warriors get the most benefit from world buffs, as a DPS and to a lesser extent a tank that is dependent on dealing crits to generate rage. Being able to get crit chance for free through world buffs was a pretty big deal. They had good baseline scaling through strength and agility, the latest version of Bloodthirst, 2 huge DPS cooldowns in Death Wish and Recklessness, heroic strike queuing, and well, just the rage mechanic in general. More gear, more damage, more crits, more rage, more pumping. The class just scales so well. And TBC is sort of the start of what warriors would go on to see for, well, quite a few expansions to come. It's similar to what fire mages experience. When you have a class that needs to crit to really put out damage, and then you take a lot of that crit away at the start of the expansion, it takes them a while to get going again. Also, itemization in TBC only really starts to throw melee a bone towards the later tiers when a lot of armor penetration items become available. Warriors don't even do that bad damage, to be honest. It's just smaller raid sides, more limited raid slots due to wanting a wide variety of specs for utility, particularly melee unfriendly mechanics in earlier tiers of raiding, which have now been confirmed to be pre-nerf. And the fact that warrior is way overrepresented in Classic at the moment. It doesn't exactly help their case that the one unique buff they can bring baseline to the raid is Commanding Shout. And that's just some extra health for your party. This will make warriors overall less of a desirable class to bring along than they are at the moment. And I don't want to scaremonger, of course, it depends on your raid. Content will be clearable with a suboptimal setup, I'm more than just a bit sure about that. And there is a lot more to raids than speed and efficiency, I get it. It's just, you shouldn't expect to be the guy who is always at the top of the meters anymore. Well, not for a long time anyway. So let's talk specializations. Fury first. Here we are then. And there's a lot of talents, and this goes for warrior DPS in general, which aren't exactly the most exciting, and you kind of have to pick them up in the arms tree to get down to deep wounds and impale, which are just too good to pass up. It kind of feels like 10 points wasted just to get what you really want. So many other classes moved away from this kind of design. In fact, it almost feels like warrior is the only class that actually still has to do this. You'll notice Death Wish and Sweeping Strikes have swapped places, which never really made a lot of sense, to be honest. Both of these fit thematically much better in their prior places, in my opinion. Tactical Mastery has moved from arms and now is at the top of the protection tree, but we're a bit short on talent points to be able to pick that up. In the Fury tree, new additions are Weapon Mastery, improved Whirlwind, and improved Berserker Stance. At least warriors get some additional threat reduction mechanic now. Bottom of the tree is Rampage, use it after a crit and it gives 250 bonus attack power at 5 stacks. Good early on, but it doesn't scale really, which is a shame. And I didn't manage to find this referenced anywhere, but is it ever worth with late game gear just dropping this and picking up Death Wish instead? 20% more damage for 30 seconds still sounds pretty nice. Maybe fights are long enough to where it's not worth it though, just a thought. And I would personally also take Piercing Howl, I just like the ability. Another new addition for Fury for the Whirlwind ability is you attack with both your main and offhand weapons now. And speaking of cleave, Sweeping Strikes is moved up from 5 attacks to 10, so you can see why their AoE is still pretty solid. Expect Fury to be a cleaving machine in dungeons and 10-man content, though it won't come into its stride in terms of single target damage as it does at the moment in Classic for quite some time. Though there is another spec Warriors will be running in PvE content too, and I'd bet this one will be more frequently seen. And the reason for that is it does bring a unique benefit for the entire raid, and that is Arms Warriors. I can't help feel like Arms was designed to be the PvP spec for the expansion, but one little talent near the bottom of the tree made it into the PvE spec as well, which is nice, I guess, some variance. You get to swing around a big sword, you get to see big crits, and everybody gets Wind Fury, so it looks like a pretty fun spec actually. Until you hear, and you may or may not be happy about this one, but you're going to be using Slam. Yep, that ability that's casted forces you to stand still and doesn't really fit with how melee classes feel in WoW. Well, that's how I see it at least. Here's our talents. Notably, Slam is reduced by a full 1 second now, a big reason towards its new viability. Going as far into Fury as we can for some talent points into Flurry, more attack speed is always great. Over in the arms tree, it's pretty similar to Classic really. New additions are improved disciplines, more rec uptime, love to see it. Getting Mortal Strike of course, that will be used in between slams. And the big addition, I suppose, is Blood Frenzy. This should be permanently up from your crits on deep wounds. 4% more physical damage for the entire raid, which is very good, and your hunters will love it. You'll also note we have Death Wish and Sweeping Strikes here, and unlike Fury, you do have a big, meaty two-hander, and are fully benefiting from those 10 cleaved attacks. Add a rec on top of that and warriors can really put out massive burst cleave. This is kind of their niche speciality now actually. At the bottom of the arms tree is Endless Rage, just a flat 25% more rage from damage dealt, which is pretty nice, keeps the resources going very well. It just tends to be the extra talents over in the Fury tree edge it out. And I know I haven't really gone over this for other classes, but professions are also worth a quick mention for the warrior when it comes to DPS. More specifically, that blacksmithing is really good. Makes sense, a warrior would want this profession, right? Reason being is we really want to be able to guarantee that we can get our hands on a very good two-handed sword. And the one I'm referring to is the Lionheart sword, which is upgradable as the expansion progresses and will pretty much always be a solid choice till later phases. And this needs you to not only be a blacksmith, but further spec into swordsmithing. Depends how much you like to min-max, but this is a choice you'll have to make against hammersmithing, which rewards an even more well-known weapon that will save for PvP. Which leaves us with Protection, the go-to tank for Classic. Come TBC, they now have some competition on their hands. Both Burrs and Paladins really step up to the table. Does the Protection tank lose their spot then? No, not at all. Prot remains a very strong choice, especially as a main tank. Which is good, because kind of like Paladins, if you aren't actively tanking something, you're not exactly contributing the most, shall we say. I suppose I should mention Prot Fury as well, the go-to tanking style for guilds that really want to push performance. Is it still a thing in TBC? Well, it's not supposed to be, and the content is pre-nerf, but I don't want to be never say never about this. At the end of the day, Prot Fury only ever existed in Classic due to the threat meter game between the tank and the DPS. It just generates the most threat, and if you can reliably survive whilst doing that, of course it's the best thing to do. Warglaive Prot Fury? Maybe? Just a little speculation. Also, Prot Fury is a much better off-tank, and Tactical Mastery was updated to add a threat modifier to Bloodthirst as well. I think though, and this is the general consensus on the subject, tanks will actually be deep protection, as they should be, wearing their heavy mitigation gear and a big old shield, the real warrior tank class fantasy. And speaking about content being pre-nerf, this is actually great news for Protection Warrior tanks. What warriors have that druids and paladins can only dream of is an actually strong defensive toolkit beyond look at how high my health bar is, those being both a last stand and of course shield wall. Here are our talents. This is more utility or defense oriented as far as Prot goes. One warrior somewhere in the raid really wants to pick up improved Demo Shout and Thunderclap. It can be any of them really, it just fits into Prot a little bit easier I think. Oh, and Thunderclap can be used in defensive stance too now, which is a great little quality of life change. Arms and Fury talents are pretty much the same as in Classic. In Protection we have improved Sunder and Focus Rage, making your abilities much more spammable, improved Shield Wall, Shield Mastery and improved defensive stance. I guess this whole tree will feel kind of new to you if you've been Fury Prot though. Shield Slam is a big threat generator, and it also dispels a magic effect as well. At the bottom of the tree we have Devastate, which is like an upgraded Sunder armor that now does a bit of stacking damage. There is a lot of CC in this tree as well, with Concussive Blow and maybe even improved Shield Bash if you wanted to pick that up as well for dungeons. Paladins and Druids do have the scaling edge on warriors for tanking, but you will still see many prot warrior tanks as a safe and stable choice in the role. Also, there are some boss mechanics that really feel as though they were made with the warrior in mind. Think Illidan's Shear ability in Black Temple. So I hope that gives you a broad outline of warriors in PvE, because I want to move on and talk PvP. To start off with, similar to other tank specializations, prot is not a thing in PvP, it just doesn't do any damage. Fury also isn't really either, well, partly it is for some key talents, but you're not going to be full on dual wielding. What warriors will be in TBC is arms, the same as it's been in Classic really. The Iron Will talent has moved over from protection, which is a nice 15% chance to resist some additional effects. This will stack up very nicely with the Orc Ratio, which has now been nerfed down from 25 to 15% by the way. Tactical Mastery and Protection is taken, combined with your passive, that's 25 rage when swapping stances. In the arms tree we have Second Wind. This is a really good new talent and will do far more over the course of a game than you would think. At least you're getting some rage whilst you're sitting in a Nova or a Root these days. Improved Hamstring is taken again, and in Fury there is Weapon Mastery, which reduces the duration of disarms against you by 50%. Weapon chains are nerfed in general by the way, you can no longer be completely immune to them. Even the ones made through blacksmithing are still just 50%, but the real benefit of this specialization is to be able to get sweeping strikes, which obviously if you're hitting two targets next to each other is just going to be an enormous amount of pressure. Alternatively, there is another build for arms where we go really deep into it and pick up Endless Rage at the bottom. This also allows you to get improved intercept, which stacks up nicely with the PvP 4 set, leaving you with a 20-second cooldown on intercept, which is really solid. PvP wise is where you consider hammersmithing instead of swordsmithing for Deep Thunder, which should be available from launch, and then in phase 2, Storm, or more commonly known, Stun Herald. It's just got a ton of stats, a very good proc that can single-handedly swing games. Also it's 3.8 speed, whilst the PvP alternative weapons are 3.6, and for arms, slower is always better. Your abilities scale off your weapon's base damage. This is why you would also consider Mace Spec, which is yet another stun on its own diminishing returns and also generates you a little bit of rage. Or you can just go sword, get a shaman in your group and pray for Wind Fury RNG. Arms in TBC is kind of like Classic, they're not really up to much solo, but with some adequate support they can turn into a force to be reckoned with in all arena brackets. Not forgetting Mortal Strike of course, this is really the big selling point of the warrior I would say. The easiest to apply 50% healing reduction effect. This makes warriors a very high pressure class when given uptime, with some strong capabilities if you crit, and sometimes some very good CC. Maces are a bit RNG heavy. Warriors are most commonly seen with druids in 2s and with Lock Druid in 3s, though they do fit into quite a wide variety of comps, and whilst they can see some longer games compared to other classes, they are a real mainstay in PvP content for TBC. So let's finish up on some tier sets. The big news is now both DPS and tanking specs get a separate set, which is really nice. Tier 4, the Warbringer armor, 200 absorb after parry, and it also has a reasonably good proc chance. In TBC, however, you still don't generate rage when damage is absorbed or dealt for that matter. Perhaps it is worth when enough things are hitting you. The 4 set is 10% more damage after a revenge hit. It's okay once again, warrior threat generation is more about ability usage rather than dealing damage, but it helps. For DPS, 2 set Whirlwind 5 less rage, and 4 set 2 more rage after one of your attacks is dodged or parried. So yeah, not bad actually, both are doing things for your damage, which is a positive. Tier 5, Destroyer armor. Protection, when you get hit by the first attack after shield blocking, it has a whole lot more block value. This is the same as the Protection Paladin set if I remember right. Seems kind of niche again. The 4 set a chance for 200 haste rating after being hit. A pretty good proc chance too. Haste is a solid stat for protection, more attacks, more heroic strike spam. Seems pretty good actually. DPS wise, Overpower gives 100 AP for 5 seconds on the 2 set, which yeah, you aren't going to be leaving Berserker stance even as arms. It just loses you too much rage to swap back and forth. The 4 set some rage cost reductions, once again it's okay. Tier 6, the Onslaught armor. Protection, 170 more health from Commanding Shout. Well, I guess it's better than nothing. Not by much though. The 4 set 10% more damage on Shield Slam, which is just okay again. DPS wise it's kind of similar to the other tiers. less rage cost, more damage. I mean, it's fine, it's not the most exciting, but it's functional. So there is a quick look at the warrior and the evolution of the class through the Dark Portal, but can we answer? The warrior, is it any better now? Well, no, not really. Compared to Classic at least, you've been playing literally the best tank and DPS by some margin. If the class got any better, they would have been on par with Wrath of the Lich King released Death Knights or Ret Paladins. No one class should remain that broken for that long. Blizzard kinda had to bring them back in line, which they did. Tanking is still as good as ever as it was for protection. They do kind of similar to how they do in PvP compared to Classic, in that they need some help to be good, though resilience goes a long way to stop you from getting globaled. DPS is where the big hit happened. You aren't going to be on top of the meters every single fight of every single raid for the whole expansion. Yes, they have great AoE for a melee. Yes, by tier 6 with more armor pen gear becoming available, they do really start to improve, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a downgrade from Classic. Though whilst warriors don't pack the utility others do, the raw damage output is solid, and by the end of the expansion is actually very good. Still, less competition for gear though, right? That's something. It could be like bringing a new druid to Molten Core at the moment and walking them out with full tier 1. All the same as we went over earlier, the class is just way overrepresented in Classic at the moment. I'd be looking at securing a guild spot sooner rather than later on the warrior, regardless of your current role or playstyle preference. It depends how you approach raiding, of course. Not everybody's sweating at the thought of passes, and that's fine, you do you. There we go then, that's the warrior. I think they get a worse reputation than they deserve. We will see exactly how the pre-nerf content with modifications will look like in TBC. It could mean dungeons and raids full of 360-degree cleaving, AoE stun spamming, incapacitating mobs, which isn't great for melee full stop, or maybe those are the kind of things that they would like to tone down a bit. Let me know if there are any bits you feel I should have included. There was a lot to the class, so I tried to get everything in I could in a reasonable time frame. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.